This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with AutoQuote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices may vary on how you buy.
Meta AI is the personal AI that's tailored to you, now with its very own app. It's built to get to know you, offering helpful answers and inspiration. Looking for something to add to your bucket list? Meta AI goes beyond traveling the world. It remembers you're a basketball fanatic and suggests you attend one of the playoff games. Just start typing or speaking to get the answers you need, wherever and whenever, because Meta AI is your personal AI. Download the Meta AI app, now available on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii in sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Welcome back to Mama Mysteries Weekly Docket, where we break down the latest and most compelling true crime stories from the week. This week, we have 5 cases on the docket. We're going to talk about, of course, the Karen Read verdict. And then we're going to talk about 796 babies that were apparently found in a septic tank at like a nun's home in Ireland. We're also going to give updates on the Christina Formella case, who was a teacher who had a very inappropriate relationship with one of her students. I mean, those cases don't ever seem to stop coming in. But anyway, we're also going to talk about the strange case of a mother's arrest and the frantic search and miraculous recovery of her 3-year-old missing daughter, Claire Bell. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the attack on Minnesota lawmakers, a violent attack on 2 political couples by Vance Boelter, exploring who he is, what motivated him, and how authorities finally caught him. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Docket number 2282CR117001, murder in the second degree. What say you? Is the defendant at the bar guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
So say you, Mr. Foreman? So say you? No. Do you agree?
Yes.
Do all of you agree?
Yes.
Thank you. 002. What say you? Is the defendant at the bar not guilty or guilty?
Not guilty.
Is not guilty or guilty of that charge or any lesser included charge? Thank you. Specifically, number 5, operating under the influence of liquor by operating a motor vehicle with a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or greater. Correct?
Yes.
So say you, Mr. Foreman?
Guilty.
So say you all?
Yes. Guilty.
003. What say you? Is the defendant at the bar leaving the scene after accident resulting in death? Is the defendant not guilty or guilty?
Not guilty.
So say you, Mr. Foreman? Yes. So say you all?
Yes.
Jurors, hearken your verdict as the court records it. You, upon your oath, say the defendant on 001 is not guilty, on 002 is guilty of operating under the influence of liquor, and 003 not guilty. Thank you.
All right, jurors, everybody please be seated. Jurors, we thank you for your service. We're going to send you back. Your service is complete. I'd like to come back and talk to you for a little bit afterwards. So thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. After 4 days of deliberations, the verdict came on June 18th, 2025, and it was a dramatic split decision. The jury acquitted Karen Read of second-degree murder, manslaughter, driving under the influence causing harm, and leaving the scene. So in other words, they did not hold her criminally responsible for John O'Keefe's death. However, the jury did find her guilty of a single lesser charge, which was operating a vehicle under the influence. You guys, I almost made a TikTok about this saying what I thought was going to happen, and it was exactly that they would find her guilty of driving under the influence, because I think that's pretty undebatable. Like, she admitted to it. Her BAC was already above the legal limit. There was all of that. So I wasn't surprised by that, but I did feel like they were going to acquit her of the second-degree murder charge, and I'm so glad they did. I'm so glad it didn't end up in another hung jury situation like the first trial. But essentially, the jurors do believe she was intoxicated that night, which Reed herself has never denied, but they did not believe she fatally hit John O'Keefe with her car or committed any intentional violence against him. So as a result, the judge immediately sentenced Karen to 1 year of probation and enrollment in an alcohol education program, a 24D program under Massachusetts law. There was no prison time given since she was cleared of the serious felonies. And outside the courthouse, you could hear a crowd of Karen Reed supporters erupting in cheers at the news of the acquittal. After the verdict was read, Karen Reed and her team stepped outside to thank her many supporters. And she said, quote, "I could not be standing here without these amazing supporters, and that no one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than she has." In my opinion, I think that statement underscores that Karen Reed, even in her victory, insists that the fight isn't over, that she maintains John was murdered by someone else and wants that truth to come out. So I wonder if there will be any impending investigations or anything after this, kind of the dust kind of settles, but I guess we'll see. And of course, I'll update you if that happens. But on the flip side, John O'Keefe's family was obviously outraged by the outcome. They issued a statement calling the verdict a devastating miscarriage of justice, firmly rejecting the notion that Karen Reed was innocent. Friends of John O'Keefe, including fellow officers, were also outraged. One friend said that watching Karen's supporters celebrate was disgusting in light of the tragedy. And it's clear that this case has left the community pretty divided. Even though Karen Reed is now legally cleared of killing her boyfriend, she still faces a civil wrongful death lawsuit from John O'Keefe's estate, meaning the courts could revisit the circumstances of his death in a different venue. And we saw this happen with, White Bronco, O.J. Simpson, when he was acquitted of murder but found guilty when it came to the wrongful death suit in Nicole and Ron Goldman's deaths. So anyway, the Karen Reed case ends with a not guilty on the most serious charges, validating the defense's claims for her supporters, but it leaves John O'Keefe's loved ones believing that a killer walks free. I get asked a lot what my personal opinions are on this case, and I had so many people texting me yesterday when the verdict broke. I was actually at the zoo with my children, and I knew that the verdict was going to come out yesterday, but I was just waiting for my phone to go off, I guess, because I wasn't going to try to keep up with it while we're walking around a 90-degree zoo. But anyway, I was relieved to hear that a verdict was reached. I was relieved to hear that it was not guilty, because there are a couple sticking points that I have when it comes to Karen Reed's innocence. And I have always believed that she was innocent because I don't believe that the injuries John sustained are from being hit by a vehicle. I don't believe that a cracked taillight or a shattered taillight, even for that matter, like the prosecution is alleging, would cause those injuries to his arm. And I don't believe that it would explain the gash on the back of his head when he is all the way in the yard. I also don't believe that being hit by a car wouldn't leave some sort of broken bones or contusions to the lower half of his body. He didn't have any broken bones, despite the Commonwealth alleging that she was going 24 or 25 miles per hour. So that alone has been a huge sticking point for me. But in addition to all the other shady stuff that happened, like the taillight issue, when was it broken? When was it scattered on the lawn? How that all makes sense. Also, the fact that the house was never investigated, that they never went into the house, they got rid of their dog shortly after this incident, that they renovated the basement, got new carpet, and yet it was still never even investigated. At the end of the day, you cannot argue that the investigation was legitimate or pure, if that makes any sense. So I think from the start that even if there are people out there who believe Karen Reed is guilty, I'm just not I'm not compelled by the evidence there. But if you're listening on Spotify, I'm going to put a poll with this episode, and I want to hear from you what your thoughts are on Karen Reed's verdict, if you think that she should have been found guilty on all charges, or if you agree with the verdict. And you can also comment if you'd like on Spotify as well. I hope Apple Podcasts catches up someday with this type of interactive experience, because I really enjoy engaging with listeners and seeing the comments. So yeah, if you're listening on Spotify, be sure to engage with that poll. Now, this next story is one of the most heartbreaking discoveries, I think, in recent memory. Investigators confirmed that the remains of 796 infants and young children were buried in what was essentially a septic tank on the grounds of a former Catholic mother and baby home in Tuam, Ireland. Now, this isn't a recent crime, but rather a historical injustice. These children died between 1925 and 1961 in a church-run institution, and for decades their resting place was unknown or covered up. In the 20th century Ireland and elsewhere, mother and baby homes were institutions where unmarried pregnant women were sent to give birth in secret due to the intense stigma against out-of-wedlock pregnancies. So these homes were typically run by Catholic nuns and tragically were often places of neglect and misery. Between 1922 and 1998, an estimated 90,000 unmarried women passed through such homes in Ireland. Many babies born there were either given up for adoption or, as it turns out, died in infancy due to malnutrition, disease, and just the poor living conditions. The particular home in Tuam, County Galway, officially St. Mary's Mother and Baby Home, run by the Boelter sisters, operated from 1925 to 1961. During that period, official records show an astonishing 796 infant and children deaths at Tuam. For context, this home had no dedicated cemetery, so locals long whispered about something not being right, and there were even rumors since the 70s of bones found in an old septic area by children playing. But for decades, nobody investigated officially. So the truth began to emerge thanks to a local woman named Catherine Corliss, an amateur historian who had heard stories and decided to dig into the archives. In 2012 to 2013, Corliss painstakingly obtained death certificates for all children who died at the Tuam home. She found 796 death records, but notably no burial records. So where had all those little bodies gone? Well, Catherine Corliss suspected the worst, that the children had been buried on the property in unmarked mass graves, perhaps even dumped in decommissioned sewage septic tanks on the ground, which matched local lore, and her research gained international attention around 2014, sparking outrage and prompting the Irish government to launch an inquiry. So in 2017, the government-appointed commission confirmed that significant quantities of human remains were found in underground chambers at the Tuam site, parts of what had been a septic system. Then DNA analysis indicated that the remains were of children ranging from newborns to age 3. It was a horrifying validation of Catherine Corliss's work. Public reaction in Ireland was obviously one of shock, shame, and sadness. Memorials sprang up in front of the home. People hung baby shoes on the gate with messages like "no room for them" to just commemorate the lost children. And the government apologized for their failings, as did the Boelter sisters. And there were promises to take action, yet action came slowly. Years of bureaucratic delays and debates followed on how to handle the Tuam site. Survivors groups and families of the missing children campaigned relentlessly for a full excavation and proper burials. It took nearly a decade, but finally, in June of 2025, a mass forensic exhumation of the Tuam site began. The area, which is now a grassy memorial garden in the middle of a housing estate, has been fenced off as a team of specialists moved in to carefully recover the remains and gather evidence. The Irish government set up an Office of the Director of Authorized Interventions at Tuam, ODAIT, led by a former Red Cross envoy to oversee this delicate work. The excavation is expected to take up to 2 years because the site must be handled with extreme care and respect, and they are effectively digging up the remains of almost 800 individuals, most of whom died as babies over half a century ago. So the remains are intermingled and in poor condition due to time and the makeshift burial conditions. A septic tank was never meant to be a crypt, but each set of remains will need careful forensic examination. And the goal is, if possible, to identify each child and give them a dignified burial. This is obviously a monumental task. ODAIT has made a public appeal for DNA samples from anyone who suspects that they had a family member die at Tuam. So, for example, people like Annette McKay in the UK, who believes her infant sister Mary is among the dead, have come forward. So Annette's mother, Maggie O'Connor, had given birth at Tuam in 1943, but baby Mary died of whooping cough at just 6 months old. and Maggie was coldly told, quote, "Your child of sin is dead." So there was no funeral and no grave. How fucking cruel. Now, for Maggie, who died in 2016, the lack of answers caused decades of torment. I cannot even imagine that. Annette McKay said seeing the excavation finally start was overwhelming because after so many delays, the exhumation will begin, and she hopes that every child is identified and buried with dignity and respect. So it's a bittersweet moment, a victory for truth and justice, but a reminder of the enormous suffering that was hidden for so long. And if it happened there, it had to have happened at other places as well. Investigators have cautioned that identifying the remains will be challenging. Many of the children were interred decades ago and may not have close living relatives to provide DNA. The environmental conditions in the tank and the commingling of remains complicate things as well. Still, they're going to try their best. The work isn't just about identification, though. It's also about uncovering any evidence of foul play. So most of the children likely died of natural causes, exacerbated by neglect, and common causes of death recorded were things like pneumonia, measles, malnutrition, things like that, like more natural causes or preventable causes, treatable causes. But authorities have said that if they find any signs that any infant died due to violence or outside the documented causes, they will open criminal investigations. In fact, the police indicated that if any remains don't match the home's records or show injury, they'll treat the site as a crime scene. Which, why aren't they just treating it as a crime scene from the get? I mean, these kids were put in septic tanks and their deaths were recorded, but they didn't have funerals. Like, I feel, I don't know what the laws are in Ireland, but I know in the US, we have laws about abusing a corpse or mishandling a corpse, not treating it properly, you know? So I don't know if there's laws like that in Ireland. If you live in Ireland, you'll have to enlighten me. I know we have some listeners over there. But the Tuam baby story has become a symbol of Ireland's reckoning with its past. Sadly, Tuam was not the only such site. It's just the most infamous. And in 2021, a report of the Mother and Baby Homes Commission found that around 9,000 children died in 18 different homes across Ireland during the 20th century. Tuam had the highest number in one location, and the Prime Minister, Taoiseach, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but the Prime Minister described the Tuam findings as a chamber of horrors. But at least now, those tiny souls are finally being given the attention that they deserve. Catherine Corliss, whose dedication brought this to light, said that she felt relief that the excavation had started, as it means Ireland is finally doing the right thing for those lost children. Now, our next case is a disturbing update out of suburban Chicago. So we've talked about Christina Formella before, but if you forgot, Christina Formella is a 30-year-old former high school teacher and soccer coach who is facing a mountain of charges for allegedly grooming and sexually abusing a student. And this week brought new revelations in the case, including dozens of additional charges and the disclosure of explicit text messages that she allegedly sent to this underage boy. So Christina Formella was a special education teacher at Downers Grove South High School in Illinois, and she also coached girls soccer and boys soccer. By all outward appearances, Christina Formella was an engaged teacher in her early 30s and even a married woman. And of course, she's attractive because for some reason, I don't understand why these teachers do this, but it's always like the good-looking teachers who you wouldn't think would need validation from something so inappropriate, but apparently they do. So I don't really understand this, but behind the scenes, police say that she was carrying on an illicit relationship with a male student that began when he was only 14 or 15 years old. That is so disgusting. I have a son who's about to be 12, and the thought of him having a relationship with a teacher in like 2 or 3 years is just unnerving. And I know that there's going to be some guys that listen to this story or see it on social media and comment, well, where was she when I was a student? You're part of the freaking problem. But the allegations came to light in March of 2025 when the student's mother happened to look through her son's phone and found messages that no parent ever wants to see. The texts between Christina and the boy were highly sexual and emotional in nature, more like something between peers or lovers and not a teacher and a student. So Horrified, the mother contacted the Downers Grove police, and Christina Formella was arrested on March 15th of 2025. She was initially charged with a few counts, specifically 1 count of aggravated criminal sexual abuse and 1 count of criminal sexual assault. Illinois defines these charges based on the victim's age and authority position of the offender. So she appeared in court on March 17th, where a judge released her on bond with strict conditions. She was barred from contacting any minors or returning to the high school. Now, at that point, it might have seemed like a relatively contained case, a single student, a few incidents, but as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered that this was far more extensive than they thought. In April, the teen victim opened up in detail during interviews at the County Children's Advocacy Center, and what he revealed led to an explosion of new charges. It turned out Christina's abuse was not a one-time lapse. It was an ongoing relationship over a year and a half. According to prosecutors, the sexual contact began in January of 2023 when the boy would have been about 14, and it continued regularly through August or September of 2024. During that period, Christina and the student allegedly had approximately 50 sexual encounters, an almost unbelievable number, with at least 45 of those incidents occurring on school grounds. You cannot tell me nobody knew what was going on. Now, this means she was either abusing him during or after school, possibly in school facilities, probably in her classroom, but oh my gosh, it's so disturbing. Other times, she admitted that she brought the boy to her home for sex. And throughout, Christina was grooming the boy, sending him countless messages that cultivated a secret romance and sexual relationship, despite the fact that she was married and he is only 14. Now, when these facts came out, a DuPage County grand jury handed up 52 additional counts against her in May of 2025. To break it down, she's now indicted on 20 counts of criminal sexual assault, 20 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse, plus 6 counts of indecent solicitation of a child, and 6 counts of grooming. So essentially, they've charged her for each instance that can be documented, reflecting just how persistently this abuse occurred. The state's attorney, Robert Berlin, said that the new allegations, especially that the abuse lasted nearly 2 years, are beyond disturbing. He praised the victim's courage in speaking up and made clear that such predatory behavior by an educator will not be tolerated. So let's talk about those text messages, since they are a key part of the evidence and really highlight the grooming dynamic. Investigators obtained Formella's messages and even notes from her phone. In one text to the 15-year-old student, Christina wrote, "I love you so much, baby. Even though this morning was short, it was perfect," end quote. In another, she was even more explicit, allegedly texting him, quote, "I love having sex with you," end quote. I mean, what a moron. Like, there's so many things wrong with this story, but the fact that she would actually say that to a 14-year-old in something that can be documented, like if the Karen Reed trial has taught us nothing, it is that you should be very careful about what you're texting people. But apparently Christina Formella never got that memo. Now imagine a teacher sending that to your child. It is mind-boggling and sickening, and I feel rage, even though it's not my child. I feel like if she was sitting in front of me, I cannot predict what would happen. But Christina Formella also apparently kept private notes on her phone about the boy, indicating that this was not a casual fling, but something that she was intensely involved in. The messages suggest a high degree of emotional manipulation, with her frequently expressing love to ensure the boy's compliance and silence. In fact, Christina herself admitted to police when she was confronted that the sexual contact started about a year and a half ago, essentially corroborating the time frame. So she was somewhat forthcoming once she was caught, which is probably why we have so much detail. The more we learn, the more it becomes clear that Christina used her roles as a teacher, a tutor, and a soccer coach to gain access to and isolate her victim. The boy was on a sports team that she coached, and possibly she tutored or mentored him academically, giving her ample opportunity to be alone with him. It appears the inappropriate contact may have even begun with something as seemingly innocent as a school messaging app or regular text about soccer, which then turned flirtatious. And one report noted that she started by sending flirtatious messages on a school messaging platform, which is a classic grooming technique. From there, she escalated to outright sexual texting and then, of course, physical encounters. So the school community was devastated by the revelations. The principal of Downers Grove South, Arwen Lipp, sent a letter to parents calling the allegations extremely disturbing and saying that the school was devastated and reeling. She acknowledged that an adult has been charged with the most serious of violations and trust has been broken. Indeed, parents entrust teachers with their kids' well-being, and this case represents a profound betrayal of that trust. Christina was immediately removed from her position and is no longer employed by the school. There's also the personal fallout because she is reportedly married, and one can only imagine the impact on her spouse and family learning of this whole double life. So as of now, Christina Formella awaits her trial. After the new indictments, prosecutors actually tried again to have her held in jail pre-trial, citing the expanded scope of allegations. But a judge denied that request. So she remains free on bond under court-ordered restrictions. Her next court date is set for August 4th. In court, she'll face the full brunt of evidence, including those cringe-inducing texts that make it hard to imagine any defense for her behavior. If convicted on even a fraction of the dozens of felony counts, she's looking at a potentially very long prison sentence. So each Class 1 felony, like sexual assault, can carry 4 to 15 years in Illinois, and there are many of them. So I will continue to follow this case and give you updates as they come, but I'm beginning to get really disturbed at how often this narrative plays out in media. Like, when are these teachers going to learn their lesson that this is not okay? I don't know. I cannot fathom it in my brain. I can't understand it, but I'll follow it and I will keep you updated on what's to come.
The Disney Plus Hulu Max bundle. It's the ultimate bundle for an unbelievable price. Plans starting at $16.99 a month. Get it and watch Marvel Television's Ironheart on Disney Plus.
I want to build something iconic.
A new season of The Bear on Hulu.
We can make people happy.
And The Epic, a Minecraft movie on Max.
Anything you can imagine is possible.
The Disney Plus Hulu Max bundle. Plans starting at $16.99 a month. All these and more streaming soon. Terms apply. Visit DisneyPlusHuluMaxBundle.com for details.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Now, this next story, I actually put in my note that I wanted to cover it on the Weekly Docket, and I was terrified that it was going to have a horrific ending, but instead it's a miracle wrapped in a mystery, if that makes sense. So I'll explain. It begins with a frantic search for a missing 3-year-old girl named Claire Bell and ends with Claire found, safe and sound, alone by the side of a highway, while her mother, Rachel Todd, is arrested and charged in connection with her disappearance. Now, the case unfolded in mid-June of 2025, spanning 2 Canadian provinces and leaving everyone asking, how did a toddler end up nearly 90 miles from her own home? So let's set the scene. It was Father's Day weekend in Montreal, Canada. On Sunday, June 15th, little Claire Bell was with her mother, who is 34-year-old Rachel Ella Todd. And they left their home in Montreal's La Salle borough around 9:45 a.m. for what one assumes was a drive or an outing. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, witnesses spotted Rachel and Claire together in the area of Castleman and St. Albert, Ontario. Now, this is important because Castleman and St. Albert is about 60 to 90 miles west of Montreal, meaning Rachel drove the child out of Quebec and into Ontario that day. Only an hour and a half later, at 3:30 p.m. Sunday, Rachel Todd suddenly showed back up in Quebec, specifically in a town called Coteau-du-Lac, I hope I'm saying that right, which is between Ottawa and Montreal. And she called police to report her daughter missing. She told authorities that Claire had vanished, and this immediately raised red flags because how did the child disappear in broad daylight during a drive with her mother? And why was the mother in a different location? So the situation was very confusing and concerning. The police in Quebec treated it with the utmost urgency. A massive search effort kicked off that Sunday and continued around the clock for the next 3 days. Hundreds of volunteers and police officers from both Quebec and Ontario participated, scouring highways, forests, and fields across a huge area spanning 2 provinces. There was an immense sense of worry in the community. A volunteer described the little girl's disappearance as very frightening and sad, knowing that she was out there in unfamiliar terrain. Claire's father, Matt Bell, who appears to be separated from Rachel, was desperately awaiting news. It was Father's Day, which just adds a layer of distress and sadness to this whole thing. Instead of celebrating, he was fearing for his child's life, thinking that she was missing. What a terrifying experience. The search operation was truly intense. The Ontario Provincial Police, or OPP, joined in because Claire was last seen on their side of the border. They deployed drones, canine units, and even took tips from local farmers who might have seen something. As days passed with no sign of Claire, fears only grew. Young children are obviously vulnerable to dehydration, exposure, and accidents, especially if they're wandering alone at only 3 years old. I have a 3-year-old son. I always think of my own kids when I talk about these stories with kids, and I don't mean that to take away from anyone else's experience. I'm just trying to relate to how that might feel, and it's impossible, right? If you've never been in that situation, you can't possibly begin to understand how that feels, but it is an absolute nightmare. It's an experience that I hope I never, ever, ever have to deal with. But there was also the unsettling possibility that Claire had been taken by someone, though authorities did not issue an Amber Alert to the public, likely because they did not have a description of an abductor and perhaps suspected the mother's involvement from the start. So finally on Wednesday, June 18th, around 3 p.m., so this is just yesterday at the time of this recording, the breakthrough finally came. A drone operated by the OPP spotted a tiny figure near Highway 417 in rural eastern Ontario, and it was Claire. She was alive and walking by herself near a wooded area by the highway. She was found near St. Albert, Ontario, not far from where she'd last been seen days earlier. The officers on scene said that finding her safe was the best result they could have imagined. After roughly 72 hours fending for herself, Claire was remarkably conscious and talking when they reached her. One Ontario police sergeant said that this is the kind of outcome that just brings out emotions in almost all of the officers because it's so rare to find a missing toddler alive and well after so long. Paramedics checked Claire out, and aside from just being tired and hungry with some bug bites, she appeared okay. So it's truly amazing that after 3 nights outside, and thankfully the weather was pretty mild, she survived. But while everyone rejoiced over Claire's safety, the focus immediately shifted to how she ended up there and what her mother did. Police had already taken Rachel Todd into custody on Monday, June 16th, as the search was ongoing, and by Wednesday, Quebec authorities formally charged Rachel with child abandonment, specifically unlawful abandonment of a child under Canadian law. At a court appearance in Salaberry-del-Valleyfield, Quebec, that Wednesday, she was ordered held in custody at least until a bail hearing that Friday. So the judge also imposed a temporary publication ban on certain details, as often happens in Canada during active investigations. So some of the details remain kind of murky, but police did reveal one intriguing detail, that they were seeking an important witness, a woman, reportedly a farmer in Ontario, who met with Rachel Todd on Sunday between 9:45 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. So this suggests that Rachel might have interacted with someone after leaving Montreal and before reporting Claire missing. Perhaps she stopped at a farm or asked someone for help, or worse, might have handed off or left Claire somewhere near that person's property. So the SQ later confirmed that they identified and spoke to that witness, piecing together more of Rachel's movements on Sunday. So far, authorities have not publicly explained Rachel Todd's motive or exactly what she did. The charge of child abandonment implies that they believe Rachel knowingly left Claire in a situation where the child's safety was endangered. Given the evidence, one scenario is that Rachel drove to Ontario with Claire for reasons unknown and at some point left the toddler behind, maybe thinking someone would find her or in some impaired state of mind. I have no idea why a mom would do this, but she then drove back toward Montreal alone and concocted the missing child report. So we do know Rachel herself was the one who called police to say that Claire was missing, which is unusual if she were trying to harm her, and it could indicate some mental health crisis or panic after an ill-advised action, but police have not charged her with kidnapping or violence, only abandonment, which in Quebec law covers failing to care for a child and leaving them at risk. Most importantly, though, is that Claire is safe and has been reunited with her family, presumably with her father, Matt, and other loved ones. And Matt Bell thanked the officers and volunteers profusely for saving his daughter. Quebec's premier also publicly thanked the police forces for their tireless work and the community for providing tips. Meanwhile, Rachel Todd remains in custody as the investigation continues. If convicted of child abandonment, she could face a significant penalty. Under Canadian law, abandoning a child can carry up to 5 years in prison, depending on specifics. But beyond legal consequences, everyone wants to know why this happened. Was it a calculated act by the mother? Was she attempting to stage something or start a new life? Or was she in distress? There's speculation in some reports that perhaps Rachel was attempting to involve the farmer witness in some plan, but those details just aren't clear yet. One thing is certain, this case could have ended in unspeakable heartbreak, but thanks to swift interprovincial cooperation and maybe a bit of luck, Claire Bell survived a 3-day ordeal that a child her age is not equipped to handle. If there are more updates on why the mom did this or any other details that I think are relevant to this story, as they come out, I will share them with you. So be sure to check out on future weekly dockets if there's updates in this story or others. Our last story sounds like something out of a crime thriller. An assailant posing as a cop launches coordinated attacks on the homes of political figures, but unfortunately, it's all too real. Vance Luther Boelter, a 57-year-old Minnesota man, is accused of ambushing 2 state lawmakers and their spouses in the early hours of June 14, 2025. By the end of his rampage, Representative Melissa Hortman, the Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, and her husband Mark were dead, and Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were seriously injured. This was a calculated, politically motivated attack that sent shockwaves through the state. So let's unpack what happened, who Boelter is, and exactly how he was caught. So it was just after 2 a.m. on Saturday when Senator John Hoffman and his wife woke up to someone pounding on their door in Champlin, Minnesota. The man outside was claiming to be a police officer, and in fact, he looked the part, wearing a tactical vest, carrying a police-style flashlight, and even donning a silicone mask to disguise his face. Boelter had outfitted his dark SUV with what looked like police license plates and emergency lights, so at a glance you would think that there was an officer on the scene. Believing something was wrong, John Hoffman and Yvette opened the door, and that's when Boelter's ruse dropped. He allegedly declared that it was a robbery and forced his way inside at gunpoint. In the chaos, Boelter shot both John and Yvette Hoffman multiple times. Miraculously, despite grave injuries, they survived. In fact, their quick-thinking teenage daughter called 911 right away as Boelter fled, which got police responding quickly. And in a later revealed detail from family, they revealed that Yvette heroically threw herself in front of their daughter to shield her during the shooting, just exemplifying a mother's instinct to protect. And on the heels of that last story, I think it's a very important detail to share because that is what a mother does. But Boelter did not stop there. According to a subsequent federal indictment, he had a hit list of targets, and he was just going down the list. After the Hoffman home, Boelter drove to the house of another state legislator in nearby Maple Grove. That lawmaker, fortunately, was away that night, so Boelter got no response and moved on down the list. By now, police from various departments were alerted that someone was attacking politicians. An officer in New Hope went to check on a state senator's home and actually spotted Boelter's SUV parked down the block. Initially, she thought that he was a fellow cop because remember, the SUV looked like a squad car and he was geared up, so she tried to speak to him, but Boelter didn't respond and just drove off quietly. So that officer then realized something was off and waited with the potential target until backup arrived, possibly preventing a third attack. Boelter's final stop was the home of Representative Melissa Hortman in Brooklyn Park, a very prominent figure, Speaker of the Minnesota House. Local police, knowing that she could be on the hit list, had already gone to proactively protect the Hortmans, but Boelter got there around 2:45, just as officers were arriving. The officers saw a man outside the Hortmans' front door, and in an instant, Boelter opened fire through the door into the home. Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, who were right behind the door, were struck by the bullets and killed almost instantly. The police on scene returned fire, and Boelter fled into the night amid the gunfight. It was a daring and devastating sequence. In the span of maybe 30 to 40 minutes, he hit 2 homes and attempted 2 others, targeting at least 4 different elected officials, and by extension, their families. Now, with 2 beloved public servants dead and 2 more wounded, law enforcement threw every resource into finding Boelter. The case was treated as domestic terrorism given the political motive. The FBI and ATF joined Minnesota authorities. A critical clue was Boelter's vehicle, which he abandoned not far from one of the scenes. Inside that SUV, investigators found a chilling piece of evidence, Boelter's notebook manifesto containing a list of over 40 names of Minnesota elected officials and other figures. Essentially, he had a hit list. Later, it came out that in total, the list had almost 70 names, including lawmakers, judges, abortion providers, and advocates across multiple states. This immediately signaled Boelter's likely ideology. Many targets were connected to abortion rights, suggesting that Boelter was violently anti-abortion and anti-government. Police also found Boelter's disguise items and lots of ammunition, as well as a Father's Day card addressed to him, perhaps from family, indicating that he left personal items behind. As the search for Boelter continued through June 14th and 15th, the public was on edge. Officials released Boelter's name and description, warning that he might be armed and dangerous. The suspect was described as a 57-year-old white male last seen in a cowboy hat, light-colored shirt, and carrying a dark bag. They even put out wanted posters with his photo, and it emerged that Boelter, anticipating a manhunt, had sent some goodbye texts to his roommates earlier that morning after the shootings. In those messages, Boelter wrote, "I love you guys, I've made some choices, I may be dead shortly," and apologized for the trouble, telling them that he was going away and didn't want to implicate them. So this shows that he fully expected a lethal confrontation or like a suicide by cop scenario. His roommates were shocked and spoke to media, indicating that they had no idea of his plans. So for nearly 48 hours, Boelter was on the run. Authorities didn't disclose exactly how they found him, but on Sunday night of June 16th, they captured Vance Boelter alive, which that shocked me. I thought for sure he was just going to kill himself, but there are unconfirmed reports that he might have been hiding in a park or a vehicle and was taken without incident by a tactical team. Also, interestingly, Boelter's wife was detained at some point after the attacks, and media reports say she was found in a car that had a passport and one of Boelter's weapons, possibly indicating that she was planning to either meet him or assist him. But I think it's also possible to assume that she was just trying to get away from him and, had a weapon in case she needed to protect herself. So it's unclear if she's going to face any charges, but it's under investigation. Now, Boelter does not fit the stereotypical profile of a fringe loner. He is a husband and a father and actually had involvement in civic life. Incredibly, Boelter had been appointed by Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, one of the people Boelter politically opposes, to a state workforce development board, serving a term from 2019 to 2023. He'd even been initially appointed under a previous governor in 2016. So this suggests that he was once considered a respectable business community member. His bio listed jobs with Nestle, 7-Eleven, Marathon Oil, etc. And at some point, however, Boelter appears to have been radicalized. His hit list and manifesto indicate a far-right, anti-government or anti-abortion extremist mindset. Prosecutors and the governor labeled the crimes as an act of targeted political violence, essentially an assassination plot. Boelter seems to have focused on Democratic lawmakers. Melissa Hortman was a high-profile Democrat. John Hoffman is a Democrat, and many names on his list were pro-choice figures. At Boelter's federal arraignment, acting U.S. Attorney Joseph Thompson said that this case was the stuff of nightmares, noting just how terrifying it is for public officials to be hunted down in their own homes. Boelter is now federally charged with multiple counts, 2 counts of murder for Melissa and Mark Hortman, 2 counts of interstate stalking for targeting the couples, and firearm offenses. The federal angle likely comes because he crossed city and county lines and targeted officials, making it a federal interest, possibly under domestic terror statutes. And Minnesota does not have the death penalty, but federal charges could carry death or life imprisonment. It's just too early to say if that's on the table, but it does show how seriously this is being handled. The victims' families and colleagues are grieving, understandably. Melissa Hortman was not only a lawmaker, but was someone who, as one touching story highlighted, stepped in to help a constituent's family dealing with ALS. John Hoffman and Yvette are recovering. In fact, their survival is being called incredibly lucky by doctors. Minnesota's political community has rallied together with an outpouring of support and also calls to address the increasing threats faced by public servants. Sadly, this incident underscores a trend of rising violent political extremism, but it also showed heroism. Law enforcement's swift response likely prevented further killings, and the Hoffmans' quick 911 call and that New Hope officer's vigilance probably saved additional lives. In the aftermath, security was beefed up for other officials, and the state capitol was on alert until Boelter was caught. And in a weird additional detail, even after Boelter's arrest, a strange incident occurred when there was a break-in at the now empty Hortman home after it had been boarded up, showing that the trauma around this event just continues, though that break-in was likely an unrelated burglary. I don't know if they were trying to loot the home or if there was like a connection, if they knew the home would be empty, so they went in and tried to take whatever they could. I don't know. Those details have not come out yet, but Vance Boelter's rampage is obviously a heinous example of targeted political violence and a clear ideological motive rooted in extremist beliefs. And thankfully, he was captured before he could claim more victims. Federal prosecutors will ensure that he faces justice, and given the mountain of evidence from the text that he sent to his list of names and everything he had in the car, I don't think Boelter will have much room to argue any kind of innocence. And I have to end this episode with a quick update on the Travis Decker situation. So in the last couple of dockets, we've talked about Travis Decker, who is the father who was alleged to have killed his 3 daughters and has been on the run for the last 2 weeks. He is still on the run. Police have not captured him yet, but they did come out with a statement saying that there's some that may be sympathetic to his cause, which I think would be misguided. Essentially saying that, if you feel bad for this guy, please don't approach him because that could be a huge mistake. And I think just in the climate that we have today, there are a lot of people who are sympathizing with criminals for whatever reason. I don't really understand that, but I can see people hearing about this story and thinking, oh, if I find him, I can help him and I can rehabilitate him or something to that effect. And basically the police are saying, don't. So anyway, with that, I will end today's episode. If there's any other major updates in the Travis Decker story, I will be sure to update you next week on the Weekly Docket. I still don't believe he's going to be found alive. I think he's probably going to take himself out. I keep saying that, but it's been 2 weeks now. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But I hope he is captured because he deserves to be miserable and suffer for what he did to his 3 little daughters. But on that note, I will end it. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you for listening to today's Weekly Docket. If you like these types of episodes with the headlines and short recaps of stories, share it to your social media, share it to someone who is also interested in true crime. It does me a big favor and I appreciate it. So Have a great weekend. Stay curious, stay vigilant. Mama Mystery out.